All right, everybody, I'll go ahead and kick us off. This is being recorded, so for folks that join late, as always, we'll share this with everyone and cut it down and share a lot of different versions. But I appreciate everybody joining today for the April webinar. I'm Michael Rentz. I'm the CRO at Gnosis, and I'm joined by Jake Hoffman, our CTO. Jake, you want to introduce yourself first before we get going?
Yeah, might as well. Thanks, Mike. Hey guys, Jake Hoffman, CTO here at Gnosis. Been here since the beginning. I lead all of our engineering and technology and product efforts, and then manage our solutions engineers who are our account managers. So all the day-to-day account management rolls up to me. It allows us to get quick product feedback, learn what our customers care about, and that gives me a lot of insight into all the stuff we're going to talk about today. But excited to be here with Mike. We don't get to hang out and talk us two at the same time, so I'm pumped for today.
Yeah, we don't get to do it publicly. We do it every day privately. And shout out to Kev Talks podcast. The first time Jake and I actually got to speak together where it was recorded was at TPM in the RV. And that was a great experience. Appreciate them sharing and promoting it and giving us all the good questions. But that's ultimately what prompted this webinar, was a lot of those questions that both Kevin and Kevin offered up to us. And so we're going to try to recreate some of that with a little bit of a Gnosis twist, and do our best to explain, what we think is working in logistics in the 2026 outlook. I don't think Jake or I are ever going to go on record and pretend that we know more than our customers or the folks that have been in the industry decades at this point do. But I do think we're good at listening to them and trying to abstract out what different customers are seeing and how they're being proactive and managing their day-to-day operations, their supply chains, and things like that. So we're going to do our best to tell you what we're seeing and what we think is working for 2026. We've carved out time for Q&A at the end of this webinar, but as always, we would prefer y'all to interrupt us. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to jump in through the chat, or if you just want to chime in. I don't even know if that's enabled, but we're happy to do it that way. So I spend most of my time, Jake gave you the description of what he does. I run the commercial side, but I spend most of my time talking to our customers, to prospects, to people in the market, trying to understand what they're seeing, trying to see around corners, trying to understand what their dream setup or dream architecture would be, for data or for software, any type of tooling that there would be. And one thing I accidentally said on the Kev Talks podcast, I think, was that it's really my job to speak for Jake. And so that makes it the hardest and the easiest job at the same time, but confident in what Jake and the team can build and deploy and deliver, which gives me the opportunity to really try to understand our customers and prospects' unique problems and get them situated within our ecosystem. So that's what we'll try to cover today. We can jump into the presentation now. So we already introduced ourselves. You can tell Jake and I are a well-oiled machine when it comes to this so far. Okay, so specifically what we're going to cover is somewhat of a 2026 outlook. I think if anybody goes on record and tells you they know what's going to happen in 2026, they're probably lying to you. But we'll do our best to kind of help you understand how we're thinking about edge cases and how they're going to impact our customers. We'll dive into what we call the Gnosis operating system framework. That's something we put on record a few years ago. 4 and 5 years ago, we coined the term container lifecycle management as a category. We quickly noticed in how our customers were using that it was developing into a true operating system, in the sense that anything that a logistics team member would do in their day-to-day, they can do from within our platform. So we're going to try to articulate that for you. Jake's going to give some really cool product updates and maybe a first time ever preview of a product roadmap. And we'll jump into the actual platform and give you a demo, and then talk about some specific unique use cases that our customers are doing with our platform. That's always the most exciting part for me, is everybody signs up and starts, and then a few months in, 6 months in, seeing how our customers are using the platform that we never anticipated or intended is like the most exciting piece for us. And hopefully sharing that with y'all will get your juices flowing, to figure out how you could also use Gnosis to better impact what you're doing in your day-to-day. One more, Jake?
Yep.
Okay, so a term that we've been saying a lot revolves around this idea of who actually owns your supply chain data. And as we've moved into 10 years now of visibility providers, or the evolution of visibility providers into something like we are, container lifecycle management. And now you see the emergence of AI, whether it's generative or agentic. It further heightens the idea of like who actually owns the data. And I think it's simple from the surface, in a sense of whether it's intelligent tooling, exception management, or the most sophisticated AI workflow. If it's training and learning and operating off of publicly available data sets, they're all going to converge to the mean. They're not going to differentiate you, especially relevant to your competitors. And so it's critically important to own as much of that data that you run your operations off of, or you train AI off of. And that's something I think that Gnosis brings to the table, is the idea of data sovereignty. So as we've made a push recently to own and originate as much of the data that's available in the logistics supply chain, specifically container milestones, but not limited to that, that's made our jobs easier at Gnosis. That's made our customers' experience better, and it's ultimately allowed them to differentiate themselves further, especially when they combine that with their own sovereign data, their inventory data, their partner data, things like that. So that's the main line in the sand right now. I think that's important for everybody to remember if they're having conversations internally or evaluating different vendors across the entire, business ecosystem, is who exactly owns the data. Are you dealing with an aggregator that's just regurgitating milestones one-to-one? Or are you dealing with a proprietary data set that somebody owns that will help you leverage your advantages? So with that, I'd love for Jake to talk a little bit more about our model, not just like the data model itself, but like our strategic initiatives to continue to create more sovereign data and what we provide to certain customers in exchange for that data. So maybe Jake, give us the genesis and evolution of that, and why it's relevant today.
I think a good example of like, what do we mean when we say like we're the originators of data, or it's sovereign data and those kind of things? A good example is we can talk about CPP, so the Container Payment Portal. And if anybody's not familiar with that, what that is us at Gnosis, in combination with PayCargo, developed a product called the Container Payment Portal that is now, it is live for Hapag-Lloyd across the country, Yangming in certain areas, Zim in certain areas. We're working with the CMA and a few others to go live with them soon as well. And the idea is that there is this whole black box of what happens at the terminal. And we at Gnosis forever have been, an aggregator, so to speak, on like aggregating data from the terminals for our customers. And so if you're a drayage carrier or drayage provider, if you're the BCO, if you're anybody that really needs that like last mile coordination of when is a container actually available at the terminal, what's the last free day, is there a custom sold, that kind of stuff. And then we use that for our customers to kind of combine what's happening there with their demurrage and detention contracts. And so we feel confidently that we have the best like aggregated version of like, discharge date, out gate, empty return, those core milestones that drive a lot of the financial things around demurrage and detention. But then we realized that we were doing it on behalf of the shippers, the BCOs or drayage carriers, or whoever it was. But the other side of the coin was the ocean carrier, that really just had like a generic view of like what's happening at a terminal. And they had their own contractual terms that maybe were a little bit outdated and legacy terms in terms of, when do you actually charge demurrage and when do you don't. And this whole initiative for Container Payment Portal was spurred by the FMC and OSRA 22. And so driving towards that container availability date, it's not just when the container gets off the ship, it's when is it actually available? Is there an appointment available for it? Is it at the bottom of a stack? Is it going away from the port on a customs exam? Does this container have 7 free days instead of 8 or whatever? There's all these like things that are all these different data sources that have to get married together in order to have this final version of truth of that. And so Hapag-Lloyd was the first ocean carrier that kind of leaned on us and said, hey, we can give you all of our contractual information about like how we think about what the contract says, but then it's our responsibility at Gnosis to take that and combine it with what's actually happening on the ground to give that source of truth of this container discharged at 9 p.m. on Thursday, but the terminal closed at 6 p.m. It opens the next day at 7 a.m. That's the container availability date. Oh yeah, and also it actually had to leave for a customs exam, so you can't charge demurrage on those days. So there's all these things that we at Gnosis marry together those things to get to that container availability date, when the last free day is, and all those kind of things. And that's something that, we approach from a customer first perspective. So the BCO, the shipper, from like an auditing, like we need to make sure that they're getting charged the right amount. But then since we did all that work to understand what's happening, it's something that we can turn around and help the ocean carriers and help the terminals and everybody else to understand what's happening and make sure the charges are correct and the invoicing and everything else. So that's been really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's like as we got pulled into this like true ecosystem play, which is anybody, BCO, ocean carrier, port terminal, rail, it doesn't matter. Anybody that touches a container, being able to provide something of value to them so it's not a one-sided relationship. And so folks that different entities within the ecosystem that have data that would be of value to the other players within the ecosystem, for us to be able to go to them and give them something of value, whether it's data or custom built software like the container payment portal, which we're doing beyond just the ocean carriers with different players that we've already mentioned. In exchange for giving them something of value in the software world, we get access to data that nobody else has. And so it's that value exchange for us. That's like we never really talk too much about it publicly, but that is like a critical component of our strategy of always bringing something to the table that makes it like a mutual exchange of value that will enhance everybody's experience when it comes to moving containers or tracking inventory or dealing with their partners.
Yeah, and I think it's what Mike's saying is like there is this like natural evolution that's happened over time where if you just take the approach of, hey, we're going to be a single pane of glass, we're going to be data for everybody. And so you go to all the ocean carriers, all the terminals, and all the drayage carriers and everybody, and you say, give me your data. Then it's kind of like, well, why? That's like, sure. I mean, I guess like someone has to tell you whatever. But if you go to them with a solution mindset of, hey, if you give us this data, here's how we can help you. We can make your operations run better. And then it becomes that ecosystem where if everybody starts playing together because they actually have incentive to do so, then the final data model is superior to everything else on the market.
Perfect. Yeah. And I mean, I think that from a high level, that's a good way, maybe for the audience, for anybody listening to this on like what I own versus what you own. And I would say I own like the core, mostly developed products and services for the core customer, which is the BCO, and that product feedback loop to you, Jake, which owns a lot of the edge case, more custom built communication and relationships with those data providers or now partners and customers, is kind of how we split the difference with what we look at both from a product and a go-to-market perspective. And that has worked really well for us. And I think is accelerating at an accelerating pace. So arguably the most exciting thing happening here is we continue to stitch together that ecosystem and build those relationships. We'll keep moving through though. Got a lot of content for everybody. So what the market is telling us, we have no idea. I don't think anybody does. It's been, I don't think anybody's ever agreed in the last couple of years on what's going to happen. I think everybody's begging for there to be some unification of whether it's like the macroeconomic environment or the geopolitical uncertainty. Tell me if it's going up. Tell me if it's going down. Tell me if it's going to stay flat. But nobody seems to agree on that, which ultimately puts people in a de-risking posture, and nobody wants to invest or make any decisions that are going to get them in trouble. And that seems to be the norm. And we spoke about this at TPM, where the status quo for the last 10 years, go out and, diversify your risk across a handful of ocean carriers, and you'll be good to go to execute your supply chain strategy is pretty much gone. That diversification aperture is expanded to the entirety of the supply chain, what you're doing at origin, destination, how you're managing your tech stack, and ultimately which different types of customers that you're going to serve. And that'll be a recurring theme through this, is you ultimately have to help grow the business. We don't think logistics teams are a cost center, definitely not with Gnosis. They're a growth center. And so enabling them to satisfy the business objectives has been really exciting for us, and especially in a volatile market. So you're looking at tariff volatility no idea when new tariffs are going to emerge, when they're going to be retracted or anything like that. Black swan events are now continuous. There's always something, and we're getting sucked into this geopolitical environment where something new is going to happen every month at this point. And ultimately, teams are having to make critical decisions on the data they don't own. And again, if everybody's being trained off of public data sets that aren't taking relevant context into consideration and building models around that and trying to originate data with that context in mind, it's going to amplify the problem. And then visibility without data ownership is what we would say is a borrowed view of your supply chain as opposed to ownership. And so we don't think you should have to outsource that visibility, but have us as an extension of your team so that you own that visibility and can configure it for anybody within the organization or outside of the organization to be able to rely on it specifically. So I think with this, we'll touch on it briefly, but like seeing our customers use our system or our data in a way that we never intended. One emerging theme we're seeing is for specific commodities, whether it's like a discount good type commodity, has set up a low-cost supply chain to satisfy customers they've been satisfying for 10 to 20 years. That market's probably frozen due to the macroeconomic environment, and therefore growth is happening for a higher end part of the market, the Lux part of the market, and a low-cost supply chain strategy isn't necessarily going to work to satisfy the demands of a higher end market. And so how do you manage multiple different supply chains? And we're seeing that, those are the words our customers came to us and said they can manage multiple different supply chains, balancing cost versus service, giving them visibility into those SLAs and being able to negotiate and partner in ways that will benefit them. So that's what I'm seeing. Jake, I'll let you chime in. You may have a more intimate view of things like that.
No, I mean, I went ahead and went to the next slide because you started to hit on a lot of the stuff here. But anything, we talk about the tariff volatility, and I think something that aligns with that is like Gnosis, we don't pretend to be able to predict what tariffs are going to hit and when and what the political climate's going to do to impact pricing and everything else. But what we can do is, since we have access to all the information around your shipments and all the milestones at origin and everything else, we can tell you how you're impacted quickly. So whenever those things happen, it's, it is reactive, but it's really fast reactive to, we have our customers coming to us all the time and asking, hey, if this tariff hits and it goes from 20% to 30%, a lot of times we know the value of the goods in the container for the customer. We know the data in-gated at origin or departed from origin or whatever milestone everybody decides is relevant to when the tariffs are impacted. And we can give people full visibility into that. And I think that's, Michael has been hitting on this for a long time, and it's, people don't want to see data. They want to use data. The amount of times I've heard him say that is crazy. But what it is because if you're just looking at information, it's kind of too late. It's like it's stale. It's, you're looking at information, you're trying to see what you need to care about. And the approach we've always taken is like, if you have data that is normalized and standardized, and then you actually have filters and charts and graphs and things that actually identify those exceptions for you and let you make decisions based on that, or sometimes even make the decision for you. That's kind of the differentiator in those two things.
Yeah, and I do say that a lot. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a logistics team or org and you're looking at data, something probably went wrong. You're using it to evaluate what exactly went wrong. And we would prefer our customers to be in more of an offensive posture and using the data. Now, there's a lot of steps we have to take, primarily trust, in order to enable that type of behavior. But I think that's the key differentiator here, as you look at the difference between what we would say is a visibility layer versus a system of record layer. And I think for us, Gnosis, we're truly a system of record. At this point, a lot of people associate system of records with the big ERPs, but the way that our customers use our platform and our data, it is a system of record. So transitioning from the visibility layer of show you what happened versus like where decisions actually get made, dependent on other data sources versus sovereign originating data. Visibility layer is you find the exception. With a system of record, the exception finds you. And finally, like, visibility is somewhat table stakes, but with a system of record and an operating system, which we'll get into, it's competitive infrastructure. And like our whole goal for logistics teams is to transition them from a defensive posture of managing exceptions, aggregating Excel reports, looking for the exceptions. They spend 99% of their time looking for the exception, 1% managing, invert that, get them off their back foot, tie into the inventory, and help them get into like an offensive posture that's really like a growth center as opposed to a cost center. So with all your AI tools trained on the same public data sets, they converge to the same average. We mentioned that earlier, but sovereign data really is the only path to differentiation. And again, like if you leave here with one thing, and I've mentioned this on the previous webinars, as you're evaluating any type of tooling, specifically AI, make sure you understand the underlying data infrastructure that that tool sits on. If it's a standalone AI tool that's going to ride on top of all your different systems, it's it's hard to imagine like what exactly is going to differentiate that beyond just what's within your four walls. And like we live in an environment in international logistics where we have to take into consideration like these extraneous disruptions and impacts that throw off everything we do. So with that, if we can jump to my favorite slide of the quarter. So I've spent a lot of time trying to abstract out everything we do. Jake and the team with the customers really create configurations and customizations and new use cases for the software. It's difficult to communicate that to the market, but I think we've been doing it long enough that most of it, if not all of it, fits squarely within this schema that we put together. Hopefully it looks like a house. But this is how we see our customers that are using most of what we have. If they're truly driving the enterprise operating system, this is what it covers. So foundationally for us, it's always the data. We say data sovereignty now. We think that's our key differentiator. We're data agnostic. We're fundamentally a data science company. Our primary sources are listed there. But even more importantly is we can ingest any data, unstructured data, anything. If the data is out there and available, we can ingest it into our system and most importantly, make it usable. And then there's really four pillars to our software. Starting left to right, we start with the container. That's the flagship product with container lifecycle management. You're live in 2 days with that. We just need the MBL and the container number. And we're talking about the container exception management, demurrage and detention alarms, automated reporting, notifications, dashboarding, unlimited user logins. That alone frees up so much time from the logistics team members to kind of get out of the weeds and get back to doing what's in their job description. After that, we focus on the inventory in transit. Most of the time that involves a bigger system of record integration, typically an ERP, mapping in what's inside the container, PO, line item, SKU, cost, customer, whatever it is, creating that digital twin, enriching it with what's happening within our platform, and then pushing that out back downstream into the system of record. We can bolt on a lot of additional advanced analytics here. But with this focusing on cash efficiency, so goods inventory to cash ratio, carrying costs, accurate transit time predictions at the item level, things like that, more intelligent PO optimization, anything like that with inventory in transit. Third is external partners. This is more at the strategic level, or can be anywhere that you typically would outsource to a 3PL, 4PL service provider, giving our BCO customers specifically the ability to do that in-house. Most popularly for us is our drayage management suite, where you can handle allocations, tendering, delivery orders, communication with the carriers themselves, but not limited to dray management, origin management, transload, et cetera. And then finally, the fourth pillar is how you manage your internal partners. This, to us, is the most exciting opportunity for investment. You know what I'm going to say, Jake?
I do, yeah.
You want to say it for me?
I'll say we always used to think about what annoys a logistics manager. And now Michael's favorite thing to say is we started shifting to who annoys a logistics manager.
And everybody knows that's typically finance. And so we created the FinOps suite. So invoice auditing, accruals, remittance, payments, landed cost analysis, but not limited to finance. It's how you work better with procurement, purchasing, sales, any of those different cross-functional teams that ultimately you have to collaborate with if you're going to truly meet your goals. Something like per diem or detention optimization, the logistics team can't truly do that without coordinating and collaborating with who's managing labor and who's planning capacity. And so as we extend how our teams, the logistics teams, interact with other cross-functional teams, we combine all these different sovereign data sets, our sovereign container data, your sovereign inventory data, your external partners data, and your internal partners data. It makes things like AI workflows that have all these proprietary data sets, what we would say nonlinear or disproportionate impact from an ROI perspective. And that's where it gets exciting for the C-suite, is because now there is a business case for the logistics team to be that growth center, to tie into top line revenue growth through sales, through cost reduction, through cash efficiency, and through de-risking. And that's the operating system. And it's not like we created this and then forced a bunch of people into it. Again, my job is to speak for Jake. Jake's job is to build solutions to take away pain for our customers. And it's a combination of those things that, like, by just looking at, how our customers are using our platform, it looks like this. And I think it unifies what we do at Gnosis with how our customers or the market thinks about what we do. The exciting part, which we'll get into next, is some new things coming for Gnosis. It's not just limited to the international space. I'm about to pass the mic to Jake to kind of talk through what I mean by that, but it's truly an end-to-end, not just visibility layer, but operating system that covers origin, international, domestic. Again, like the infrastructure itself, the data, the intelligent tooling has unlocked the ability for us to build and deploy solutions for all the teams at our customers.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And I'll talk here based on everything that Mike was just saying, like, how do we actually implement that? Like, how do we build the house for our customers, so to speak? And I think there's like the underlying data set that is ever changing and always getting better. And so everything we do informs that data set, that container tracking information. We talked about container payment portal, and we talked about the rail carriers that we work with and the terminals and everybody else. But all that informs container tracking information. And for container payment portal, we're calculating what the last free day is. So for us, instead of us like, oh, we got to go figure out what this last free day is and get it from somewhere, we are the source of truth for it. And so it's like the ocean carriers depend on us for a lot of that information. So we are the calculation engine that supports that. So instead of going to other places to get that, it's in our data model itself. We have this here. Here's a couple of different things that we've shipped recently that our customers are finding value in. It's all within our platform. It's how we take advantage of the data that we have, expand into specific problem sets that people are trying to solve. The AI workflows, there's so many problems that we have already figured out how to solve for our customers based on using the underlying infrastructure that we already have. Examples of this, and I'll show an explicit example in a second when I jump into the platform, but can range from parsing commercial invoices and unstructured data. It can be Excel, PDF, whatever. That's where we parse documents and put all the data into a nice clean table and to make it API-ified, if you will. So information can be put into different systems and you can do calculations on it and all those kind of things. Looking at parsing emails, parsing equipment interchange receipts, automating, like looking at data to identify exceptions and automatically send emails out whenever anything happens. There's all these types of workflows that we've created. And we have it both on a customer basis. So customers ask for specific things and we can do it for them. But then we have some global workflows that we implement for all of our customers and just helps make our software better. So we're using our own software to make our own product better, and so to speak. The advanced analytics, I'll show a quick sample of that, but you think everything that we've talked about from a container tracking, visibility, calculation, and everything perspective, we have so much information about global container trade and transit times and rates even on ocean and everything else. And so once we have that, it's easy for us to kind of look at all that information and benchmark. So one thing that customers always ask about is like, hey, what are my transit times compared to market? Where am I behind the 8 ball and where am I doing really, really well? And so we have examples of that to show. And then the third piece here would be emissions tracking. We get super granular to using all the different data sources that we shared on the previous slide of how far an individual vessel traveled, how far a container traveled, the mode of transport from ocean to rail to truck, and using the best accepted frameworks for how you can measure that using GLEC and using the other frameworks. We're able to give our customers a full full end-to-end screenshot, snapshot, whatever you want to call it, of their carbon emissions. And so down to a container, you shipped it from point A all the way from point B, C, D, all the way to your final destination. What was your impact on the environment with that? And we have a sample of what that looks like in our platform. So
we have a
I'll
quick
stop
question,
here.
Jake, as you can pull it up, but I think it plays into what you're saying. So ownership of data in a supply chain remains fragmented based on who generates it and where it is generated. Each supply chain partner owns its data and may only give access to some of it at some times to other supply chain partners. Your comments on this?
Yeah, and I think that's what we kind of started to talk about earlier, where it's like we don't just approach companies and say, hey, give us all your data. There's always a value add for them. And so it doesn't, I'll use the example of, let's say, an ocean carrier. For us to go to an ocean carrier, if we were totally separate from any of the parties we work with or anybody else and say, hey, give us your container tracking information, they'll say, why? Because you're going to turn around and sell it to somebody. Well, maybe, but there's a whole ecosystem of ways that we can support that ocean carrier. The examples are they have to serve their BCO. Well, we can serve the BCO on their behalf. We can do, instead of the ocean carrier having to do a bunch of EDI 315 integrations and send data to the customer, they send one integration to us and we branch out and do it to all the different people outside of that. The point, Tom, that you're making here about this like fragmented ecosystem is 100% true. And that's why it is super important that we talk about how Gnosis like approaches this problem instead of just regurgitating. All these different systems have their own like local schema, their own local data tables, and they're all optimizing for their local max. We can take data from all the different systems and stitch it into one standardized end-to-end piece that oftentimes we end up creating that sovereign data that lives between those systems. It's not just like the container availability date, for example, or the demurrage last free day or something, an example of the container payment portal. Those are not data points that exist somewhere. They only exist through us stitching together the information from all these different places and creating that final source of that data. So the statement rings 100% true. And that's where you have to find ways to incentivize people to participate and then have your own opinionated model of what stitches everything together.
Thank you. I hope that answered, Tom, but if not, I'm happy to dive even deeper as Jake's pulling up the platform to show you some of the products he just mentioned.
So Mike, am I sharing the EIR workflow here? Can you see it?
Yes, you're probably gonna have to zoom in a lot.
Yeah, so I'd say I'm in our, over here on the left side of our page, we have this workflows tab, and this explicit example I'm going to talk about here is a global workflow. So this is something that's available to all of our customers, or it is available globally. And the idea is that anytime that we get an equipment interchange receipt, Gnosis is in the data aggregation, normalization, standardization, and sometimes creation, as I was just talking about, of the core container milestones in a journey. Well, sometimes an outgate or empty return or one of those gate transactions doesn't hold up. It's not in the ocean carrier data, the terminal, or whatever it is. And so for a while, we're getting like screenshots of equipment interchange receipts from drayage carriers and from logistics partners and everything else. So instead of us just taking, hey, you can enter it in and then we'll just parse that outgate or whatever it is to all of our customers, we needed a way to show that it is actually valid because it's going to inform a whole lot of downstream calculations and everything else. And so we used our own workflow tool to actually assess the legitimacy of an equipment interchange receipt and then go through all these steps after that basically I'll summarize everything that's happening here is it's taking that equipment interchange receipt, it's assessing if it is completely legitimate or not. And so assessing, is it something actually from the terminal? Is there a trucker SCAC on it? There's all this work that goes into that. And then there's all these downstream effects. If it's legitimate and moves through, it parses out. Is it a outgate or an empty return, or what is this actual gate transaction? And then it processes all this data downstream. This entire workflow is enabled by us using AI to understand what is actually in this equipment interchange receipt. It's looking for things like the container number, the timestamp, maybe the chassis that's associated to it, the drayage carrier that either is picking up the container or empty returning it. But this is a way that we use these AI workflows to further enable our data set. That is something that is currently outside the realm of what the ocean carriers, the terminals, or anybody else has, that we're able to do just through using our own software and using our own workflow tool that we've developed. Other examples are, recalculating demurrage and detention as a workflow. If the EIR comes in an email, we're able to look at the email and then trigger this workflow based off of the email. There's a whole lot more examples that you can see could follow this same thing here. The same way that this is structured to pull data out of an EIR, it can be used. I've talked with so many people about pulling data out of commercial invoices, arrival notices, parsing out pickup numbers, for example, parsing out charges from invoices. There's so many different use cases out of this AI workflow tool that we've been able to enable for our customers.
And click on the drop down menu where you shows that the catalog of different tools that you can add over the top right.
Yep.
Like if you wanted to add a node,
I can on
as you come into that. So, but basically this was developed as a product internally to enable, our solutions engineers who are embedded with the customers to what would have traditionally taken months or years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, a tremendous amount of development work that we can do in minutes, less than a day. All these nodes are pre-configured here that you can drag and drop and arrange. And so it has enabled our solutions engineers to configure all of these things, primarily edge case or nuanced case, whether it's data ingestion or, monotonous processes that take place outside the platform, being able for us to be able to capture that. One, we can replicate the process and give you your time back, but then we expand the data aperture. And now all of that data that was outside of our system is now part of our system and much more available to you. So this is now a product that we are packaged in different suites, whether it's an onboarding suite or an enablement suite or a hypercare suite, in other products specifically, or if you want the ability to configure these yourself, we have them as individual workflows where our team will configure these with you if you have an idea on how you want to use them. So really cool stuff that Jake and the team have built. Another question, can you send a booking request to different carriers using this product?
Yes, and I'm assuming in that regard, someone's talking about like an ocean booking request. That is actually, Michael mentioned so I guess two. One, I'll talk about drayage first, so drayage tendering, and then I'll talk about ocean booking. So drayage tendering, I actually pulled this up. I talked about parsing arrival notices. Here is an arrival notice parser. It looks for an arrival notice. It summarizes it. It parses out the data. It looks for the available drayage carriers. It sends emails to the drayage carriers, and then it finishes. So it's literally taking an arrival notice, parsing through all the data, figuring out what the information is, looking for a pickup number. And this workflow is fully automated and executed just based on how you have it set up. So that would be on the like drayage tendering delivery order piece. For the actual ocean booking piece, and I assume that's what we're talking about when we're saying using this tool. Yes, because there's the ocean booking piece would be generating an EEI 300, so a booking request, and then receiving back a 301. But that booking piece is also something that is on the near-term Gnosis roadmap to actually execute independent of these workflows. So a lot of these workflows would be customer specific or these different one-off scenarios. Actually executing an ocean booking will soon be a part of the Gnosis standard ecosystem for API endpoints and all those kind of things.
Good deal. Great question. Want to jump through advanced analytics and carbon emissions?
Yeah. And Mike, what do you, maybe like the benchmarking piece here?
I think transit times first and then the benchmarking. So if you go transit time benchmarking, top left. No, on the same page.
Oh, sorry. Here, yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then just kind of drill down Shanghai to LAX. Just or click into East Asia and isolate a lane.
Perfect. Okay, so this is we're looking at analytics of transit time. So this is transit times of your containers moving on specific lanes compared to the market. And so you can actually really click in, and I'm in Shanghai to LA, and then you can actually break it down further by carrier. But when you see any of these individual, the shades, the red, the green, and everything else, that's indicative of how you're performing against the market. So in this case, Maersk for me from Shanghai to LA, I'm 11.8% below the market median in terms of how my transit times are.
That one's doing well. So if you go to a red one, the white bell curve in this case would be all of your transit times. This is toggled to a year, how they have performed over the year compared to our market data. So for this one specifically, and if you look at all the different columns, you have ocean transit, total transit, time at origin, terminal dwell, off terminal, any of the legs and nodes as reductive as you want. That white bell curve will compare your specific performance for that carrier and that specific part of the container lifecycle to the market. So if you highlight a red one, it'll show, or a green one. This one says you were 27.9% worse than the market for the terminal dwell for this total lane.
Yep.
So,
and that's all these are calculated according to, you have the ocean piece. So that's like original vessel departure at origin all the way to vessel arrival at port of discharge. But then you have terminal dwell. So this is in LA, right? The time the container discharges to outgate. And as you just like look across this, you can see that there's a ton of red in this category. So if I'm logged into this particular customer, my work at this specific, maybe across every operation, it looks like, is where I need to maybe focus on my terminal dwell. So getting containers out faster.
And I think with this, again, like talking to our customers and as they mature through our different products, if you talk to a VP or SVP of logistics, 80% of their budget is taken up by the ocean freight rates, which is the majority. So it's hard to think about something different. And yes, we can save a bunch of money on demurrage and detention or giving you your time back. But with this tool, whether it's the transit time benchmarking or the rate benchmarking, which Jake will go to, if we have better visibility into the SLAs on behalf of the BCOs better than the carriers do. And so if you're negotiating these multiple different supply chain strategies and you're having to balance cost versus service, we can start to help you leverage either one of those back into your contract or back into your relationship. And if we can help you save 1, 2, 3% in that part of the budget, that's going to save way more money than giving you your time back. And that's the exciting part for us as our customer. We have all this data, these sovereign data sets that can surface this performance data scorecarding to enable you to have better insights into where you can win better together with those partners. And Jake flipped over to the rate benchmarking. We have a partnership with Zanetta. So comparing the market rates versus your rates, and then again, attaching it to that transit time performance. And in these quadrants here in the left-hand side, you see overpaying but slower, overpaying but faster, saving slower. And then if you just click negotiate better rate in the red box in the top right there, it'll pre-subset it for you. And this is where it's overpaying but slower. So again, giving you better visibility, combining both service and cost, and allowing you to be proactive or at least informed when it comes to negotiation. So there's been a couple questions roll in. We'll talk through those as we're going over time. But the first one is, how do you handle ocean bookings across carriers? For example, CMA Mexico, CMA Peru, CMA Guatemala, where different contract numbers exist.
So for that, I can talk through CMA specifically. Every carrier handles things differently. For CMA, we have, because we work so closely with them, we have an API connection that all we do on our side is just different API parameters that go into the actual booking request. So that's an easier one. I think it kind of depends on the carrier and the situation, but we work according to whatever the standards are set by the carriers. In that example explicitly, it's pretty easy though.
Good deal. Next one is, does the system have an alert system which sends information either on completion of key milestones or an exceptional unexpected occurrences? Yeah, we do. Everything we do is centers around that. The two that are proactive is, one is Report Builder, which is the ability to automate the sending of live data in an Excel format on a structured cadence where you can control the filter. So imagine creating like a custom Excel report that then you to tell the system when it needs to go out every Tuesday, Thursday at 12, which Jake is demoing now, and you can choose who it goes to by group or by individual. You can create the body of the email, subject, etc. Very, very friendly. The other one is our notifications, which are event-driven milestones, and those can be notified via webhook or automated email. But something like an ETA changes by 3 or more days, or a transship dwells 5 days, or anything like that that's based off of the event milestones themselves, we can push that. And then obviously we'll surface it in the standard dashboarding or alarms or alerts pages. But yes, we do have the ability to, with our different alert systems, to proactively notify whoever it is that needs to be notified. A couple more questions. How do you handle gaps in visibility when carriers aren't integrated?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we always talk about like what's in network versus what's out of network. In network for us is anything where you can just give us a container number and a bill of lading and we'll track everything. And there's no further integration required from you. And that's where we have several customers who that's their primary way that they work with us is through our aggregated and sovereign data and enriched data and all those kind of things that we can do everything within network. If there is maybe a carrier that we've never worked with before that you move a lot of volume with, and we will make that integration on your behalf. Or if it's a service provider or somebody that's outside that normal, say just for ocean, we're talking about just for ocean, then we will do an EDI integration, an API integration, whatever that carrier has the capability to do just on your behalf as a part of the service. And so there's a natural in network, and then if it's out of network, then we do it on your behalf. No problem.
And he specifically mentions Chiquita Dole,
Yeah,
which
exactly. And I mean, Mike, I was to say we work with them, we've integrated with them, whatever capability they have, we can meet them where we're at. Dole is actually a part of Dole is a customer of ours, and we work super closely with them, and so we have data feeds back and forth and do a lot of things with them.
a couple more questions. Is the rate benchmarking data available via your API?
So we would have the Zanetta piece specifically is where we just have it served directly from them. And so I don't know. I don't think we could probably serve that via the API just because it's like traditional Zanetta data that we'd probably just make an introduction to them. But your rate data, obviously, whatever we have and everything that we put in there, we absolutely would be able to serve via API. We would serve as a standardization layer between all your different contracts and everything else, and then you have access to that.
Cool. Another question would really help us if you could add a tab on the view container screen, aka the all-knowing iScreen that would give item PO data for the container. We have that. So just go to any subset, click on the I, and then reference data. You'd have to be a CLM Plus customer. That's where we do the inventory and transit visibility. But Jake, if you go to like any shipment and click on the I so it zooms out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you click on the I and then you would go to reference material and right here, the third. And so if you have CLM Plus, like all of that information would be there, not just in this view, but in all the other views. And I see Amanda. Yeah, it does. It does. So we'll show you that. No worries at all. Who would be the primary contact to discuss our company needs and potential collaboration? I'm happy to do that. Follow up with us directly. Our team's paying attention, and we can reach out to you as well. But we'll connect after this. A couple more things. We wanted to show carbon emissions, Jake, and then we'll go back to that last slide and round out. Appreciate everybody sticking around.
Yep, I'll do. I know we have 10 minutes left, so I wanted to get through this. The emissions piece, I kind of alluded to it a little bit previously when we were on the slide, but looking at calculating carbon emissions per carrier over time. A lot of the carbon emissions are pegged to the vessel distance that it traveled, how large the vessel is. And there's all these factors that are back end in these equations that are able to calculate this. But we're actually able to calculate due to the granularity of all the data that we have as far as, an ocean container where it ingates at origin, it gets on a barge or a vessel, it transships. You can see here, there's some of these journey legs. There's two, sometimes three, sometimes more that we're calculating the individual carbon emission impact for each one, and then giving you the aggregated view. So that for any of that scope 3 emissions reporting that is either required already or going to be required in the future, we give you that full summary because we have such granular data and we do all the calculations on our back end there. This is just a sample of like what it looks like. We have a couple of customers that use it for not just ocean and rail, but also the actual drayage piece by working with because we know the distribution center or the delivery locations, we know the mileage according to all the mapping APIs and everything, that we're actually able to calculate the last trucking emissions as well, to give that full end-to-end emissions piece for all the reporting and everything that's necessary for our customers.
Sweet. Another comment, Taj, good to hear from you, man. We got to catch up after this, but appreciate the compliment. All right, so if we share that last slide, Jake, I'll kind of round us out. Again, thank you, everybody. I know we went way over, and we'll be doing more of these to help everybody stay in the loop. But for the last piece is kind of what leading teams are doing now. We broke this down into 3 phases, like the immediate impact, the immediate impact, medium impact, and then long term. And it's simple, like, and again, this kind of progresses as you move through those 4 pillars: container, inventory, external partners, internal partners. Most importantly, we want to get the logistics teams off their back foot, out of the weeds, not having to aggregate Excel reports and run complicated formulas in Excel, not cross-checking websites, things like that. We start there. The immediate impact are typically time, but more importantly, asset-based, late fees, so demurrage and detention. We reduce our customers' D&D down 85% within the first 90 days, so it's an extremely fast time to value. Second is, as we start to pull in that inventory and transit data, start to think about how you manage your external partners, things like invoice auditing, we can tighten the system, making sure that you're being billed what you bargained for, making sure that performance is what you bargained for, making sure there's no slack in the system. And then as we truly push into how you interact and engage and work with the cross-functional teams, if you're typically a port-to-door shop and now want to consider being port-to-port, bringing that drayage in-house, that's more at the strategic architectural level. And that's the long-term vision. And that's what we've seen first and foremost and always through our customers and how they utilize our platform. If it's getting all those things together, thinking 1, 2, 3 years down the road, how do I negotiate and partner better with my carriers, things like that, that's where the savings really start to amplify. And then expanding that data aperture with our AI workflow tools, all of that rolls up together to ultimately give our customers back their most precious and valuable resource, which is their people's time. And if you had to abstract what Gnosis does, that's what we do, is we give people their time back to do what's in their job description and think critically on behalf of the business. And we're always going to do that. So thank you all so much for sticking around. We have another webinar on Earth Day next week, the 22nd of April, where we'll do a deeper dive into carbon emissions tracking only. This one has been very, very popular. A lot of people pay for this in a sense of like who they negotiate contracts with. We give you visibility into that. Then ultimately for your leadership teams to be able to have a very granular view of that is hugely beneficial. We have a question. Does the carbon emissions tracking extend to break bulk and multi-purpose vessels, Jake?
I actually was just responding to you, Taj. It does not in current state, but we're working on it. We're almost there. We needed a good use case, and we have 1 or 2 customers that have been asking for it. So we do have that.
Yeah, the underlying infrastructure is there, like Jake mentioned, in that like we can track it, and the calculation itself sits on top of it. So, but good deal. Thank y'all so much. If I'm not seeing any other questions, we appreciate y'all hanging out during lunch. I'll be in Wilmington this weekend for the North Carolina Ports Cold Chain Summit, speaking on a panel there. We'll be at the Gartner Supply Chain event in Orlando in a few weeks. I think Jake will be at AgTC in Tacoma in about a month. So more coming on our export CLM package, which I think is really, really exciting as we've gotten some key customers in that export piece and helping with documentation, PO, sales order management, booking, all the way through the system. So a lot of really exciting things. One more question. Where do you see your biggest differentiator compared to platforms like Project 44? It's going to be first and foremost and always the data. We own the data sovereignty. We have a relationship with Project 44. So like we have the most sovereign data when it comes to logistics space in general, making it operational grade, measuring our data and latency, and then the execution tooling. So like the full suite of tools that you can replace or do your entire day-to-day from within our platform. we started an inch wide, mile deep in the international space. And so really going down into the weeds with our customers to enabling them to like work from within the platform. So happy to talk in more detail offline, Raul, on that. So feel free to reach out and we'll tell you everything. So
I think
like all those guys, everybody a lot, I think they all do really, really good things. But we're a little bit different than everybody else.
Raul, one last comment. I know you can talk to Michael later on it, but I'd say the way we engage with our customers is probably different than every other technology provider in the space. I think there's current customers that are on this and customers that we talk to every day. I tell everybody this recently, and it's like been a talking point for me, is I'm the CTO, right? I'm super proud of the data and the software and everything else that we've developed. But you go ask 10 Gnosis customers, why do you work with Gnosis? What is the reason why? I guarantee you they say the people. They say that they never say no. They help us solve problems that are specific to our business and everything else. So I think the data and everything else is great, but everybody talks so highly about our team and how they work with them. And I think that's probably the best part about us.
Yeah, that's right. We don't have a ticket system. You'll be interacting with people like Jake and me always in perpetuity. We don't just go through onboarding and give you the software and go the other way. We're going to be with you forever. Our team, our company is an extension of y'all's teams. And, we're very protective of that. And that's the core differentiator for us always. So happy to chat more. Thank you again to everybody, all the great questions, sticking around way past the time. Looking forward to doing a few more of these. And if anything, as always, we're an open book. You can always reach out to us. We're happy to jump on and talk about anything you'd want to know. But thank y'all so much. We appreciate it.